3 hours into what should have been the most romantic evening of my married life, I watched my husband of exactly 48 hours pack his suitcase and walk out of our honeymoon suite without a word of explanation. What I discovered in the weeks that followed would transform me from a heartbroken bride into a woman who understood her true worth and the power of authentic relationships built on genuine respect rather than calculated convenience. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Sterling, and at 29 years old, I had believed I was beginning the greatest chapter of my life with the man I thought was my perfect partner. The wedding had been everything I had dreamed of since childhood, a magnificent celebration held at the historic Ashford Manor in the rolling hills of Virginia, surrounded by 300 of our closest family members and friends. The ceremony itself had felt like a fairy tale, with cascading white roses, a string quartet performing classical melodies, and golden sunlight streaming through the ancient oak trees that framed the outdoor altar. For 18 months, I had dedicated myself to planning every detail of our celebration, from the hand-calligraphed invitations to the 7-course reception dinner featuring locally sourced ingredients from Virginia's finest farms. Each decision reflected my vision of creating a meaningful beginning to our marriage, a celebration that would honor both our individual journeys and our shared commitment to building something beautiful together. The path that led me to that altar began 3 years earlier at a corporate retreat in Charleston, South Carolina, where I first encountered James Montgomery during a leadership development conference for emerging professionals in the financial services industry. I was representing my employer, Meridian Financial Advisory, where I had established myself as one of their most successful wealth management consultants, specializing in comprehensive financial planning for high-net-worth individuals and families. James had approached me during the networking reception, introducing himself as a senior associate with Patterson & Associates, a boutique investment firm based in Richmond. His confident demeanor and articulate discussion of market trends immediately impressed me, as did his apparent dedication to helping clients achieve their long-term financial objectives. Our initial conversation extended well beyond the formal networking period, continuing over dinner and late-night discussions about our shared professional values and personal aspirations. The early months of our relationship had been filled with romantic weekends exploring Virginia's wine country, intimate dinners at Charleston's finest restaurants, and long conversations about our dreams for the future. James possessed a natural charm that made him welcome in any social setting, and his ability to engage meaningfully with my family and friends had convinced me that I had found someone who truly understood and appreciated the people and values that mattered most to me. Our relationship dynamic had seemed perfectly complementary. My success at Meridian Financial had provided me with extensive connections throughout Virginia's business community, relationships that had developed through years of dedicated service and genuine commitment to my clients' financial well-being. James often expressed admiration for my professional achievements and the respect I had earned within the industry, frequently asking about upcoming client events, charity functions, and industry conferences that provided opportunities for meaningful networking and business development. I had interpreted his interest in my professional activities as supportive engagement from a partner who understood the demands and rewards of building a successful career in financial services. His questions about my clients, his enthusiasm for attending industry events as my guest, and his genuine appreciation for the lifestyle my success afforded us had seemed like evidence of a man who valued my accomplishments and wanted to share in the life I had worked diligently to create. The proposal had been everything I could have imagined. James had arranged a surprise weekend at the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia, where he presented me with a stunning 3-carat diamond ring during a private dinner overlooking the resort's championship golf course. His speech about wanting to build a life together, his promises about supporting my continued professional growth, and his vision for our shared future had moved me to tears of joy and gratitude. The 18 months of engagement had been a whirlwind of wedding planning, career advancement, and relationship building that seemed to validate every hope I had invested in our partnership. During this period, I had achieved several significant professional milestones, including recognition as Meridian Financial's youngest senior consultant, and an invitation to join the board of directors for the Virginia Association of Financial Planners, a prestigious appointment that reflected my growing influence within the industry. James had been wonderfully supportive throughout these achievements, celebrating my successes and encouraging me to pursue opportunities that would further enhance my professional reputation. His enthusiasm for my career growth had seemed genuine, and his willingness to attend the various professional and social events that accompanied my advancing career had demonstrated his commitment to being a true partner in all aspects of my life. Our wedding planning process had revealed James's exceptional attention to detail and his commitment to creating a memorable celebration. He had participated actively in selecting vendors, choosing menu options, and coordinating logistics, always deferring to my preferences while offering thoughtful suggestions that enhanced our overall vision. His family had welcomed me warmly, and the integration of our social circles had proceeded smoothly, creating the foundation for what I believed would be a lifetime of shared friendships and meaningful relationships. The wedding day itself had exceeded every expectation I had harbored during our extensive planning process. The ceremony had been conducted by Reverend Michael Harrison, the pastor who had baptized me as an infant and provided spiritual guidance throughout my childhood and adolescence. His words about marriage as a sacred partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering commitment had resonated deeply with both James and me, creating what felt like a profound spiritual foundation for our union. The reception had been equally magical, featuring dining and dancing that continued well into the evening hours. James had been the perfect groom, charming our guests, delivering a heartfelt speech about his love and gratitude, and dancing with me to our chosen song, "At Last" by Etta James, while our family and friends surrounded us with their love and well wishes for our future together. The photography session had captured hundreds of beautiful moments that would preserve the joy and celebration of our wedding day for years to come. Every detail had been executed flawlessly, from the floral arrangements that had transformed Ashford Manor into a romantic paradise, to the 7-piece band that had kept our guests dancing until the final moments of the celebration. Following the reception, James and I had spent our wedding night at the Ashford Manor's bridal suite, a luxuriously appointed room overlooking the estate's gardens and countryside. The evening had been tender and romantic, filled with quiet conversations about our gratitude for the beautiful celebration and our excitement about beginning our married life together. James had expressed his appreciation for all the work I had invested in creating such a meaningful wedding, and his words of love and commitment had reinforced my confidence in the choice I had made. The next morning, we had departed for our honeymoon destination, a week-long stay at the Four Seasons Resort in Maui, Hawaii, a location we had selected together during our engagement planning. The resort represented everything we had envisioned for our first vacation as a married couple, offering world-class accommodations, pristine beaches, and romantic dining options that would provide the perfect setting for beginning our marriage with relaxation, intimacy, and quality time together. The flight to Hawaii had been comfortable and enjoyable, filled with conversations about our wedding memories, our appreciation for our family and friends, and our anticipation of the week ahead. James had been attentive and affectionate throughout our travel, holding my hand during takeoff and landing, sharing meals and magazines, and expressing his excitement about experiencing Hawaii together for the first time. Upon our arrival at the Four Seasons Resort, we had been greeted with the traditional Hawaiian lei ceremony and escorted to our oceanfront suite, a spectacular accommodation featuring panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean, a private lanai, and luxurious amenities that exceeded even our elevated expectations. The suite had been decorated with tropical flowers and welcome amenities from the resort staff, creating an atmosphere of romance and celebration that seemed perfect for beginning our married life together. Our first day had been spent exploring the resort grounds, enjoying the pristine beach, and dining at the oceanfront restaurant while watching one of the most spectacular sunsets either of us had ever witnessed. James had been loving and attentive, taking photographs of us together, engaging in meaningful conversations about our hopes for our marriage, and expressing his appreciation for the beautiful setting I had helped select for our honeymoon. The second day had begun with a couple's massage at the resort spa, followed by snorkeling excursions that allowed us to explore the magnificent underwater coral reefs that surrounded the island. James had been adventurous and fun-loving, encouraging me to try new experiences and sharing in the wonder of discovering Hawaii's natural beauty together. Our afternoon had been spent lounging on the beach, reading, and enjoying tropical drinks while planning the activities we wanted to pursue during the remainder of our stay. That evening, we had dressed for dinner at the resort's most exclusive restaurant, a romantic establishment that required advance reservations and offered multi-course tasting menus paired with wines from around the world. I had chosen a flowing sundress in ocean blue that complemented the tropical setting, while James had worn the linen shirt and dress pants that emphasized his handsome features and confident bearing. The dinner had been extraordinary, featuring locally sourced seafood, tropical fruits, and innovative preparations that showcased Hawaii's culinary excellence. James and I had shared multiple courses, discussing the flavors and presentations while enjoying intimate conversation about our wedding memories and our gratitude for the opportunity to experience such a beautiful honeymoon together. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Following dinner, we had returned to our suite, where James had suggested we open the bottle of champagne that had been provided as a welcome gift from the resort management. The champagne had been perfectly chilled, and we had toasted our marriage while standing on our private lanai, watching the moonlight reflect across the ocean waters and listening to the gentle sound of waves reaching the shore below our accommodation. It was during this moment of perfect romantic bliss that James had suddenly become withdrawn and distant. His responses to my conversation became monosyllabic, and his physical affection diminished noticeably. When I asked if something was troubling him, he had dismissed my concerns with vague reassurances that everything was fine, though his behavior clearly contradicted his words. Within an hour, James had begun moving around our suite with apparent purpose, gathering his personal belongings and placing them systematically in his suitcase. When I questioned his actions, he had responded that he needed to handle some urgent business matters that required his immediate attention back in Richmond. His explanation had been delivered without emotion or apology, as if leaving his bride of 2 days was simply a minor inconvenience rather than a devastating abandonment. My attempts to understand his sudden change in behavior, to offer alternative solutions that might allow him to address his business concerns without ending our honeymoon, or to express my confusion and hurt about his decision, had been met with increasing coldness and impatience. James had made it clear that his departure was non-negotiable and that my feelings about the situation were not his primary concern. As I watched him pack his belongings and prepare to leave our honeymoon suite, I experienced a profound sense of disbelief and heartbreak that would mark the beginning of the most challenging and ultimately transformative period of my life. The man I had married, the partner I had trusted with my future, was walking away from our marriage during what should have been our most intimate and joyful time together, leaving me to face the devastating realization that everything I had believed about our relationship might have been an illusion. The silence in our honeymoon suite after James departed felt deafening, broken only by the gentle sound of waves against the shore that had seemed so romantic just hours earlier. I stood motionless on the private lanai, still wearing the ocean blue dress I had chosen for our romantic dinner, clutching the champagne flute that now felt like evidence of a celebration that had ended in incomprehensible abandonment. The immediate shock of his departure had left me unable to process the reality of what had just occurred. My husband of 48 hours had packed his belongings with methodical efficiency and walked out of our honeymoon suite as if ending our marriage celebration was simply another business transaction requiring his attention. The casual manner in which he had dismissed my questions and concerns suggested a level of emotional detachment that seemed impossible to reconcile with the loving partner who had promised to cherish me just 2 days earlier. As the hours passed, I found myself replaying every interaction from our wedding day and the initial days of our honeymoon, searching for signs that might have predicted this devastating abandonment. The exercise felt surreal, as if I were analyzing the behavior of a stranger rather than the man I had chosen to share my life with after 3 years of what I had believed was genuine courtship and authentic emotional connection. The first indication that something deeper might be troubling our relationship had actually occurred during our wedding reception, though at the time I had dismissed it as nervous energy from the excitement of our celebration. During the cocktail hour, I had noticed James engaging in unusually lengthy conversations with several of my professional colleagues, discussions that seemed to focus more on business opportunities than wedding celebration. Marcus Wellington from Commonwealth Investment Group had approached me later in the evening to express his appreciation for meeting James and to mention their conversation about potential collaboration between their firms. His comment had struck me as slightly odd, since James had never previously expressed interest in working with Commonwealth, and our wedding reception seemed an inappropriate venue for serious business development discussions. Similarly, Catherine Morrison from Virginia Capital Management had made a point of telling me how impressed she had been with James's knowledge of emerging market trends and his insights about potential investment opportunities in the Richmond area. Her enthusiasm about potentially introducing James to her firm's senior partners had seemed generous but unusual, given that she barely knew my new husband and typically maintained strict boundaries between her personal and professional relationships. At the time, I had interpreted these interactions as evidence of James's natural charm and his ability to make meaningful connections with the people who mattered to me professionally. His engagement with my colleagues had seemed like supportive behavior from a husband who understood the importance of my professional relationships and wanted to contribute positively to my career network. However, as I reflected on these conversations while sitting alone in our honeymoon suite, I began to recognize patterns that suggested James's motivations might have been more calculated than I had initially understood. His questions during our engagement about my client relationships, his enthusiasm for attending industry events, and his detailed knowledge of my colleagues' business interests began to seem less like supportive partnership and more like strategic information gathering. The morning after James's departure, I attempted to contact him through multiple channels, hoping to understand his reasoning and perhaps convince him to return to complete our honeymoon as planned. My calls went directly to voicemail, my text messages received no responses, and my attempts to reach him through his office were met with vague explanations that he was unavailable due to urgent business matters. The resort staff, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual situation of a bride abandoned during her honeymoon, offered to assist with any arrangements I might need. The concierge, Maria Santos, approached me with genuine concern and professional discretion, suggesting various activities and services that might help me make the best of my remaining time in Hawaii despite the unexpected change in circumstances. Her kindness and professionalism provided a stark contrast to James's callous abandonment, and our conversations began to help me process the emotional impact of my situation while maintaining some sense of dignity and self-respect. Maria had worked at the resort for 12 years and had undoubtedly witnessed various relationship difficulties among her guests, yet she treated my circumstances with the sensitivity and respect that my own husband had failed to demonstrate. During our discussions, Maria shared observations about successful couples she had encountered throughout her hospitality career. Her insights about the characteristics that distinguished authentic partnerships from superficial relationships began to provide me with a framework for understanding what had gone wrong in my marriage and what I should seek in future relationships. According to Maria, the couples who seemed most genuinely happy and connected were those who demonstrated consistent consideration for each other's feelings, who made decisions collaboratively rather than unilaterally, and who maintained their commitment to the relationship even when facing unexpected challenges or inconveniences. These qualities, she explained, were evident in small daily interactions rather than grand romantic gestures. Her observations prompted me to examine my relationship with James through this lens of authentic partnership versus superficial compatibility. As I considered our 3-year courtship and 18-month engagement, I began to recognize instances where James had demonstrated the kind of unilateral decision-making and selective consideration that had culminated in his honeymoon abandonment. During our engagement, James had frequently made social commitments on our behalf without consulting me first, assuming that I would be available and willing to attend events that served his professional or personal interests. When I had expressed concerns about this pattern, he had dismissed my feedback as oversensitivity and had continued making commitments without seeking my input or agreement. His approach to our wedding planning had followed a similar pattern. While he had participated actively in selecting vendors and coordinating logistics, he had consistently deferred to my preferences in a way that seemed less like collaborative decision-making and more like delegating responsibility for outcomes, while maintaining the right to criticize or change directions if results did not meet his expectations. The financial aspects of our wedding had been entirely my responsibility, despite James's assurances that we were building a life together as equal partners. My savings had funded the majority of our wedding expenses, including the venue rental, catering, photography, and entertainment, while James had contributed primarily to his personal attire and the rehearsal dinner hosted by his family. At the time, I had accepted this arrangement as a natural consequence of my higher income and more established financial position. However, as I reflected on our relationship dynamics while sitting alone in Hawaii, I began to question whether James's willingness to allow me to fund our celebration reflected a lack of genuine investment in our marriage or a pattern of expecting me to provide resources while he maintained control over decisions and priorities. The third day of my solitary honeymoon brought additional revelations that further illuminated the true nature of my relationship with James. While reviewing our joint credit card statements to understand the financial implications of his sudden departure, I discovered several charges from the weeks leading up to our wedding that I had not authorized or been informed about. James had used our shared account to purchase expensive gifts for several business associates, including a crystal decanter set for Thomas Richardson from Pinnacle Wealth Management, and a premium wine collection for David Chen from Atlantic Financial Services. These purchases had been made during the final weeks of our wedding preparation, when I had assumed we were focused entirely on our celebration and honeymoon planning. More troubling was a series of charges at high-end restaurants in Richmond during evenings, when James had told me he was working late or attending client meetings. The timing and amount suggested elaborate dinner meetings or social occasions that had never been mentioned in our conversations about his work schedule or professional activities. The most shocking discovery was a charge for jewelry from an upscale boutique in Richmond, purchased just 1 week before our wedding. The amount was substantial, and the timing seemed to suggest a gift for someone other than me, since James had already presented me with my engagement ring and wedding jewelry months earlier during our engagement period. These financial revelations forced me to confront the possibility that James had been maintaining relationships or commitments that he had never discussed with me, despite our supposed partnership and shared transparency about our lives and activities. The pattern of undisclosed expenses suggested a level of secrecy that seemed incompatible with the honest communication I had believed was the foundation of our relationship. My attempts to contact James about these discoveries met with the same silence that had greeted my earlier efforts to understand his abrupt departure. His continued unavailability began to seem less like emergency business obligations and more like deliberate avoidance of accountability for his behavior and decisions. The fourth day of my honeymoon brought an unexpected phone call from Rebecca Thompson, my closest friend since college and the maid of honor at our wedding. Her voice carried a mixture of concern and hesitation that immediately suggested she had information that might help explain James's behavior, though she was uncertain about whether sharing her observations would be helpful or potentially harmful. Rebecca had noticed several troubling interactions during our wedding celebration that she had initially decided to keep private rather than potentially spoiling my happiness on such an important day. However, James's abandonment of our honeymoon had convinced her that I needed to understand the full context of his behavior and the concerns that had prompted her observations. During the wedding reception, Rebecca had witnessed James in what appeared to be an intimate conversation with Caroline Mitchell, a woman she recognized as a marketing executive from a competing financial services firm in Richmond. Their interaction had seemed inappropriately personal for a wedding celebration, involving physical contact and whispered conversations that suggested a relationship extending beyond professional acquaintance. Caroline had not been included on our wedding guest list, and her presence at our reception had puzzled Rebecca until she observed James discreetly providing Caroline with information about accessing the celebration. His secretive assistance in bringing an uninvited guest to our wedding suggested a level of personal investment in Caroline's presence that seemed entirely inappropriate for a groom on his wedding day. Rebecca had also observed James checking his phone frequently throughout our reception, often stepping away from our guests to respond to text messages or calls that seemed to require his immediate attention. While such behavior might be acceptable during normal social occasions, his divided attention during our wedding celebration had struck Rebecca as disrespectful to both me and our guests, who had traveled significant distances to share in our happiness. Most disturbing was Rebecca's observation that James had seemed more relaxed and genuine during his conversations with Caroline than during his interactions with me throughout our wedding day. His behavior with our uninvited guest had displayed an ease and intimacy that contrasted sharply with what Rebecca described as his more performed or calculated interactions with me and our wedding party. These revelations from Rebecca provided crucial context for understanding James's sudden departure from our honeymoon. Rather than representing an isolated incident of poor judgment or business pressure, his abandonment appeared to be part of a broader pattern of divided loyalties and hidden relationships that had been ongoing during our engagement and had culminated in his choice to prioritize other commitments over our marriage. The information Rebecca provided also helped explain James's unusual behavior during our final evening together, when he had become withdrawn and distant after our romantic dinner. His change in demeanor now seemed likely connected to communications or commitments involving Caroline or other undisclosed relationships, rather than the emergency business matters he had claimed required his immediate departure. As my week in Hawaii continued without my husband, I found myself experiencing a profound shift in perspective about my marriage, my judgment, and my future. The initial shock and heartbreak of James's abandonment gradually gave way to a growing sense of clarity about the true nature of our relationship and the patterns of behavior I had overlooked or rationalized during our courtship. The solitude provided by my unexpected circumstances allowed me to process these revelations without the distractions and social pressures that might have influenced my thinking in our normal environment. The physical beauty of Hawaii, combined with the emotional distance from my regular routine, created an ideal setting for honest self-reflection and strategic planning about how to respond to my situation. Rather than allowing myself to be consumed by anger or self-pity, I began to recognize that James's abandonment had actually provided me with valuable information about his character and priorities that might have taken months or years to discover under normal circumstances. His willingness to walk away from our marriage, during our honeymoon, had revealed fundamental aspects of his personality that were incompatible with the authentic partnership I deserved. The week that had been planned as a celebration of our union instead became a period of profound personal growth and self-discovery. I began to understand that my worth was not dependent on James's validation or commitment, and that his departure reflected his limitations, rather than any inadequacy on my part. By the end of my time in Hawaii, I had developed a preliminary strategy for addressing my situation that would protect my interests while maintaining my dignity and integrity. The foundation of this approach would be thorough investigation of James's activities and motivations, strategic protection of my financial and professional assets, and ultimately, transformation of his abandonment into an opportunity for creating a more authentic and fulfilling life. The woman who returned to Virginia after that week was fundamentally different from the heartbroken bride who had been abandoned in paradise. I had discovered reserves of strength and clarity that would serve me well in the challenges ahead, and I was prepared to demonstrate that abandoning a woman of substance and integrity would prove to be the most costly mistake James had ever made. Returning to Richmond after my solitary week in Hawaii felt like entering a completely different world than the one I had left as a hopeful newlywed. The familiar sights of our shared apartment, the wedding gifts still scattered across our dining room table, and the framed photographs from our celebration created a surreal contrast to the clarity and determination I had developed during my unexpected period of reflection and strategic planning. James had not returned to our apartment during my absence, though evidence of his brief presence remained in the form of missing clothing, personal documents, and several items of value that belonged to both of us. His systematic removal of specific belongings suggested deliberate planning rather than the impulsive departure he had claimed was necessary to address urgent business matters during our honeymoon. The first priority upon my return was establishing a comprehensive understanding of our financial situation and protecting my assets from any potential misuse during this period of uncertainty about our marriage status. My experience in wealth management had taught me that financial security often determined the outcome of personal crises, and I was determined to approach this situation with the same analytical rigor I applied to my professional responsibilities. A thorough review of our joint banking accounts revealed additional unauthorized expenditures that had occurred during the week of my absence in Hawaii. James had withdrawn substantial amounts of cash from our shared savings account, transferred funds to accounts I had never seen before, and made several large purchases using our joint credit cards without any communication or explanation about these financial decisions. The pattern of expenditures suggested James was funding activities or commitments that required significant financial resources, yet none of these expenses aligned with any personal or professional obligations he had previously discussed with me. The secrecy surrounding these financial activities indicated a level of deception that extended far beyond his abandonment of our honeymoon and suggested more systematic dishonesty about his activities and relationships. Most concerning was a series of transfers to an account belonging to Caroline Mitchell, the woman Rebecca had observed James speaking with intimately during our wedding reception. The amounts and timing of these transfers indicated a financial relationship that had been ongoing during our engagement period, yet James had never mentioned any business or personal arrangements that would require such substantial monetary exchanges. The discovery of these financial connections to Caroline prompted me to conduct more extensive research into her background and her relationship with James. Using the professional research skills I had developed during my career in financial services, I began gathering information about Caroline's employment history, business activities, and social connections within Richmond's professional community. Caroline Mitchell had been employed by Prestige Financial Partners for approximately 2 years, working as a senior marketing director responsible for client acquisition and business development. Her professional background included previous positions with several competing financial services firms in the Richmond area, suggesting she possessed extensive knowledge of the local industry and its key players. More significantly, Caroline had recently launched her own consulting firm, Sterling Bridge Advisors, which specialized in helping established financial professionals transition to independent practice. The timing of her business launch coincided closely with the period when James had begun discussing his own ambitions to leave Patterson and Associates and establish his own investment advisory practice. The connection between Caroline's business activities and James's professional aspirations suggested a relationship that extended far beyond casual acquaintance or even romantic involvement. The financial transfers from our joint accounts appeared to be funding James's participation in Caroline's consulting services, using money I had contributed to what I believed was our shared savings for our future together. Further investigation revealed that James had been attending regular business development meetings with Caroline throughout our engagement period, sessions that he had characterized to me as routine client meetings or professional networking events. The systematic nature of these meetings, combined with the financial payments Caroline had been receiving, indicated a formal business relationship that James had deliberately concealed from me. The realization that James had been using our joint financial resources to fund his secret business relationship with Caroline while maintaining the facade of our engagement and wedding planning was profoundly disturbing. His deception extended beyond emotional betrayal to include financial exploitation of my trust and resources for purposes that directly contradicted his commitments to our marriage. During the second week after my return from Hawaii, I received an unexpected phone call from Patricia Chen, a senior partner at Atlantic Financial Services, whom I had known professionally for several years. Her call was ostensibly social, inquiring about my honeymoon and expressing concern that she had not heard from James since our wedding, despite his promise to follow up on potential collaboration opportunities they had discussed during our reception. Patricia's inquiry provided an opportunity to gather additional information about James's professional activities and commitments, without revealing the crisis in our marriage. Her comments about their wedding conversation confirmed that James had indeed been using our celebration as a networking opportunity, presenting himself as someone positioned to develop new business relationships that could benefit both parties. More troubling was Patricia's revelation that James had specifically mentioned his access to my client relationships and professional connections as assets he could bring to any potential business partnership. His characterization of my professional network as resources he could leverage for his own advancement demonstrated a calculated approach to our marriage that reduced me from a partner to a business asset. Patricia also mentioned that James had expressed confidence about his upcoming transition to independent practice, suggesting he had already developed comprehensive plans for leaving Patterson and Associates and establishing his own firm. The timing and certainty of his statements indicated that his business plans were far more advanced than he had ever shared with me, despite the significant impact such changes would have on our financial future and lifestyle. This conversation with Patricia illuminated another dimension of James's deception during our engagement and marriage. While maintaining the appearance of a committed partner planning our shared future, he had simultaneously been developing alternative professional arrangements that would fundamentally alter our circumstances without seeking my input or agreement about these major life changes. The third week after my return brought additional revelations through my ongoing investigation into James's activities and relationships. A chance encounter with Michelle Rodriguez, a former colleague from my early career at Commonwealth Investment Group, provided unexpected insights into James's recent professional behavior and his relationship with Caroline Mitchell. Michelle had recently attended an industry conference in Washington where James and Caroline had presented themselves as business partners, delivering a joint presentation about innovative approaches to client acquisition and retention in the current market environment. Their professional collaboration appeared to be far more advanced than the consulting relationship I had initially understood based on my financial discoveries. According to Michelle, James and Caroline had demonstrated remarkable synergy during their presentation, finishing each other's thoughts and presenting unified perspectives that suggested extensive collaboration and shared strategic vision. Their professional partnership appeared to extend beyond typical consultant-client arrangements to encompass genuine business collaboration and mutual investment in shared objectives. More significantly, Michelle had observed James and Caroline socializing together after their presentation, attending conference events and networking functions as a couple rather than as professional associates. Their behavior had suggested personal intimacy that extended well beyond business collaboration, confirming the romantic relationship that Rebecca had suspected based on her wedding observations. The realization that James had been presenting himself publicly as Caroline's business partner and romantic companion while maintaining his engagement and marriage to me was profoundly shocking. His systematic deception had involved creating and maintaining entirely separate professional and personal identities that contradicted his commitments to our relationship. Michelle's information also revealed that James had been representing himself at the conference as the founder of Sterling Bridge Advisors. The consulting firm I had discovered was actually owned and operated by Caroline Mitchell. His willingness to claim credit for Caroline's business achievements suggested the same pattern of appropriation and misrepresentation that had characterized his approach to my professional relationships and resources. The fourth week of my investigation brought the most disturbing revelation yet, discovered through my review of James's social media activities during the period of our engagement and marriage. Using techniques I had learned during professional background research for high-net-worth clients, I was able to access archived posts and communications that revealed the true timeline and nature of his relationship with Caroline. James had been in regular communication with Caroline throughout the entire period of our engagement, sharing intimate details about his personal life, expressing doubts about his commitment to our marriage, and discussing strategies for managing the complications that our relationship created for his professional and personal objectives. Most shocking were messages in which James explicitly discussed his intention to use our marriage as a temporary arrangement that would provide him with access to my professional network and financial resources, while he developed his business relationship with Caroline. His communications revealed a calculated plan to exploit our marriage for strategic advantage while maintaining his primary emotional and professional commitment to Caroline. The messages included detailed discussions of how James could maximize the business value of our wedding celebration, which professional relationships he hoped to develop through my connections, and how he could manage the transition from our marriage to his planned future with Caroline once he had achieved his professional objectives. Reading these communications was simultaneously heartbreaking and liberating. The heartbreak came from understanding the depth of James's deception and the calculated nature of his approach to our relationship. The liberation came from recognizing that his abandonment of our honeymoon was actually a gift that had prevented me from investing more years in a relationship built entirely on exploitation and misrepresentation. The evidence I had gathered through my investigation painted a comprehensive picture of systematic deception that extended across every aspect of our relationship. James had used our courtship, engagement, and marriage as strategic tools for advancing his professional objectives and his relationship with Caroline, while maintaining the facade of commitment to me long enough to achieve his goals. The financial exploitation I had discovered represented just one dimension of his calculated approach to our relationship. His willingness to appropriate my professional reputation, exploit my social connections, and misrepresent his own achievements demonstrated a pattern of opportunistic behavior that would have continued indefinitely if he had not revealed his true character through his honeymoon abandonment. By the end of my fourth week of investigation, I had developed a comprehensive understanding of James's activities, motivations, and plans that provided the foundation for my strategic response to his betrayal. Rather than remaining a victim of his deception, I was positioned to transform his abandonment into an opportunity for protecting my interests and demonstrating the consequences of exploiting a woman of integrity and substance. The evidence I had gathered would serve multiple purposes in the weeks ahead. It would protect my financial interests during any divorce proceedings, clarify the true nature of our relationship for our mutual friends and professional contacts, and provide the foundation for ensuring that James faced appropriate consequences for his systematic deception and exploitation. More importantly, the investigation process had strengthened my confidence in my analytical abilities, confirmed my professional instincts about evaluating character and motivation, and demonstrated that I possessed the skills and resources necessary to protect my interests and create positive outcomes even from devastating personal betrayals. The woman who had been abandoned in Hawaii had transformed into someone who understood not only what had happened to her marriage, but also how to ensure that justice would be served, and that her future would be built on the authentic relationships and genuine success she deserved. The foundation was now established for the strategic response that would demonstrate the costly mistake James had made when he chose to abandon a woman who possessed both the intelligence to uncover his deception and the resources to ensure appropriate consequences for his betrayal. The comprehensive evidence I had gathered during my month-long investigation provided undeniable proof of James's systematic deception and calculated exploitation of our marriage. However, I recognized that possessing information and utilizing it strategically represented two entirely different challenges. My professional experience in wealth management had taught me that successful outcomes required not only accurate analysis, but also precise timing and methodical execution of carefully planned strategies. The decision to test James's true priorities and commitments emerged from my understanding that confronting him directly with evidence of his betrayal would likely result in denial, deflection, and continued manipulation. Instead, I needed to create circumstances that would compel him to reveal his authentic character and priorities through his own choices and reactions, providing irrefutable demonstration of his true nature that no amount of charm or manipulation could contradict. The foundation of my testing strategy centered on presenting James with a scenario that would force him to choose between maintaining his facade of commitment to our marriage or pursuing his genuine priorities involving Caroline Mitchell and their shared business objectives. The test needed to be sophisticated enough to reveal the truth, while providing me with clear evidence of his decision-making process and underlying motivations. After extensive consideration of various approaches, I developed a comprehensive plan that would simultaneously test James's loyalty, expose his deception to our mutual professional network, and position me advantageously for the inevitable dissolution of our marriage. The strategy required careful coordination of multiple elements, including financial arrangements, professional communications, and social dynamics that would create maximum pressure for authentic responses. The first component of my testing strategy involved reaching out to James through intermediaries, who could deliver information designed to gauge his priorities and reactions. Rather than contacting him directly, which would allow him to control the conversation and potentially manipulate the outcome, I arranged for specific professionals within our shared network to convey carefully crafted messages that would prompt revealing responses. I contacted Patricia Chen at Atlantic Financial Services, who had previously inquired about James's follow-up regarding their wedding conversation about potential collaboration opportunities. During our discussion, I mentioned that James was considering several significant career changes that might affect his availability for new business partnerships, suggesting that anyone interested in working with him should probably accelerate their timeline for initial discussions. Patricia expressed immediate concern about potentially missing an opportunity to explore the collaboration possibilities James had outlined during our wedding reception. Her reaction confirmed that James had indeed presented himself as someone with valuable resources and connections to offer, reinforcing my understanding of how he had positioned our marriage as a business asset rather than a personal commitment. More importantly, Patricia immediately contacted James to express her urgency about moving forward with their discussions, creating the first test of his priorities. Would he respond enthusiastically to pursue the business opportunity he had cultivated using my professional reputation? Or would he demonstrate genuine commitment to repairing our marriage by declining professional discussions until he had addressed his personal responsibilities? The second component of my strategy involved creating financial pressure that would reveal James's true priorities regarding our shared resources and his relationship with Caroline Mitchell. Through careful manipulation of our joint accounts, I arranged circumstances that would require James to make clear choices about how he allocated his time, attention, and financial resources when facing competing demands. I temporarily froze our joint savings account, citing security concerns about unauthorized access that required both account holders to appear in person at the bank to verify their identity and reset account parameters. This action would prevent James from continuing his pattern of transferring funds to Caroline, while creating urgency about addressing our financial arrangements if he wished to maintain access to the resources he had been exploiting. Simultaneously, I initiated discussions with my attorney about protecting my individual assets and establishing clear documentation of our respective financial contributions to the marriage. These legal preparations served both practical and strategic purposes, ensuring my financial security while creating visible evidence of serious intent that would reach James through our interconnected professional network. The third element of my testing approach involved leveraging the social dynamics within Richmond's financial services community to create circumstances where James would need to choose between maintaining his professional deception or acknowledging the truth about our marriage. The close-knit nature of our industry meant that information traveled quickly among professionals, and inconsistencies in James's various narratives would eventually create untenable contradictions. I arranged to attend the Virginia Financial Planning Association's monthly networking dinner, an event where James had previously accompanied me and where our shared professional contacts would naturally expect to see us together as newlyweds. My appearance at this event without James, combined with carefully managed responses to inquiries about his absence, would create social pressure that would reach him through multiple channels. During conversations at the networking event, I mentioned that James was facing some significant personal and professional decisions that required his immediate attention, suggesting that our colleagues might not see him at industry events for some time while he sorted through his priorities. This narrative created curiosity and concern among our mutual contacts while positioning me as the stable professional presence in our marriage relationship. The fourth component of my strategy involved testing James's emotional attachment to our marriage by creating opportunities for him to demonstrate genuine concern for my well-being or to reveal his indifference to my situation. This psychological element of the test would provide crucial insights into whether any authentic feelings existed beneath his calculated approach to our relationship. I arranged for Rebecca Thompson, my maid of honor and closest friend, to contact James expressing concern about my emotional state following our honeymoon experience. Rebecca would mention that I seemed unusually withdrawn and troubled, suggesting that I needed support from my husband during what appeared to be a difficult adjustment period following our wedding celebration. Rebecca's call would provide James with a clear opportunity to demonstrate caring concern by reaching out to me, inquiring about my well-being, or taking steps to address whatever issues might be affecting my emotional state. His response, or lack thereof, would reveal whether he possessed any genuine emotional investment in my happiness and welfare. The fifth and most sophisticated element of my testing strategy involved creating apparent professional opportunities that would compete directly with James's commitments to Carolyn Mitchell and their shared business ventures. By presenting him with scenarios that offered significant career advancement but required abandoning or postponing his relationship with Caroline, I could observe his true priorities when forced to choose between competing interests. Through my professional network, I arranged for Marcus Wellington at Commonwealth Investment Group to extend a preliminary offer of employment to James, contingent upon his availability for intensive training and immediate full-time commitment to their wealth management division. The position would provide substantial salary increases and long-term career growth opportunities, but would require James to abandon any competing business interests or external consulting arrangements. This opportunity represented exactly the type of career advancement James had claimed to be pursuing when he characterized his consulting relationship with Caroline as professional development. His response to a genuine offer of advancement would reveal whether his relationship with Caroline was truly about business opportunities or represented personal priorities that superseded professional growth. The implementation of my comprehensive testing strategy began during the 6th week following my return from Hawaii. Each component was carefully timed to create maximum pressure, while allowing sufficient opportunity for James to respond authentically rather than reactively. The goal was not to trap him in contradictions, but rather to create circumstances where his true character and priorities would be revealed through his natural responses to realistic scenarios. Patricia Chen's initial contact with James about accelerating their business discussions generated an immediate and enthusiastic response. Within 24 hours of her call, James had contacted her to schedule a meeting, expressing eagerness to explore collaboration opportunities and suggesting several potential approaches for integrating their respective professional capabilities. His rapid response to Patricia's business inquiry, contrasted with his complete silence regarding our marriage situation, provided the first clear indication of his priorities. The energy and attention he devoted to pursuing professional opportunities through my network demonstrated that his commitment to business advancement significantly exceeded any concern for repairing our relationship. The financial pressure created by freezing our joint accounts produced equally revealing results. Rather than contacting me directly to discuss the situation or express concern about potential security issues, James immediately contacted the bank to inquire about alternative access methods and procedures for resolving account restrictions without requiring my participation. His approach to the financial constraints demonstrated his continued expectation of access to our shared resources without acknowledging the need for communication or collaboration with me. The entitled nature of his response reinforced my understanding that he viewed our joint assets as resources available for his use rather than shared property requiring mutual agreement about allocation and spending decisions. The social pressure created by my appearance at industry events without James generated significant curiosity and concern among our professional contacts. Multiple colleagues reached out to inquire about James's absence and to express their surprise that he was not accompanying me to events where our attendance together had been expected and anticipated. The questions and concerns expressed by our mutual professional contacts created a network of communication that would inevitably reach James through multiple channels. His response to these social pressures would indicate whether he valued his professional reputation enough to address the growing speculation about our marriage, or whether he remained focused primarily on his alternative priorities. Rebecca's call expressing concern about my emotional well-being provided James with a direct opportunity to demonstrate caring or indifference toward my situation. Her message clearly communicated that I was struggling with difficulties that might benefit from support and attention from my husband, creating circumstances where any reasonable spouse would naturally respond with concern and outreach. James's reaction to Rebecca's concern was perhaps the most revealing aspect of the entire testing process. Rather than contacting me directly to inquire about my well-being or offer support, he responded to Rebecca by suggesting that I was probably experiencing normal adjustment difficulties following our wedding, and that I should consider professional counseling if I was having trouble managing my emotions independently. His response demonstrated a fundamental lack of empathy or concern for my emotional state, while simultaneously suggesting that any difficulties I might be experiencing were my personal responsibility rather than issues that might benefit from support or attention from my spouse. The callousness of his reaction provided definitive evidence of his emotional detachment from our marriage. The employment opportunity presented by Marcus Wellington at Commonwealth Investment Group created the most significant test of James's competing priorities. The position offered substantial career advancement, financial benefits, and professional prestige that aligned perfectly with the ambitions James had expressed throughout our relationship regarding his long-term career objectives. However, accepting the Commonwealth position would require James to abandon his consulting relationship with Caroline Mitchell and commit to exclusive employment that would prevent him from pursuing the independent business ventures they had been developing together. His response to this opportunity would reveal whether his relationship with Caroline was truly about professional development or represented personal commitments that superseded career advancement. James's reaction to the Commonwealth opportunity was swift and definitive. He declined the position without requesting additional details about compensation, responsibilities, or growth potential, explaining to Marcus that he had already committed to alternative business arrangements that precluded accepting traditional employment opportunities. His immediate rejection of a significant career opportunity, without even exploring the details or attempting to negotiate terms that might accommodate his existing commitments, provided conclusive evidence that his relationship with Caroline represented his primary priority. The certainty and speed of his refusal demonstrated that no professional opportunity, regardless of its merits, would compete successfully with his commitment to Caroline and their shared ventures. The cumulative results of my comprehensive testing strategy painted an unambiguous picture of James's true character, priorities, and commitments. Every component of the test had generated responses that confirmed his emotional detachment from our marriage, his continued exploitation of our shared resources and professional connections, and his primary commitment to his relationship and business partnership with Caroline Mitchell. The testing process had also demonstrated that James possessed no genuine intention of repairing our marriage, addressing his deceptive behavior, or acknowledging his responsibilities as a husband. His consistent pattern of prioritizing business opportunities, financial access, and his relationship with Caroline over any consideration for my well-being or our marriage vows confirmed that his abandonment of our honeymoon represented his authentic priorities rather than a temporary lapse in judgment. More importantly, the testing strategy had provided me with comprehensive evidence of James's character and decision-making process that would be essential for the next phase of my response. Rather than relying on assumptions or interpretations of his behavior, I now possessed documented proof of his priorities and commitments that would support my strategic actions moving forward. The conclusion of my testing period marked the end of any uncertainty about the nature of my marriage or the possibility of reconciliation with James. The evidence was clear, comprehensive, and irrefutable. James had chosen his path through his own responses to realistic scenarios and genuine opportunities, providing me with the foundation necessary to proceed with confidence and determination toward the strategic response his betrayal had earned. The implementation of my comprehensive testing strategy began producing immediate and revealing results that exceeded even my calculated expectations regarding James's true character and priorities. Within 72 hours of initiating the various components of my strategic approach, I had gathered sufficient evidence to confirm every suspicion about his deceptive behavior, while simultaneously positioning myself advantageously for the decisive actions that would follow. The first significant response emerged from Patricia Chen's accelerated outreach regarding potential business collaboration with James. Her urgent communication about timeline pressures had prompted an immediate and enthusiastic reaction that demonstrated his willingness to prioritize professional opportunities over addressing the crisis in our marriage. James had not only responded within hours of Patricia's initial contact, but it also provided detailed proposals for collaboration that revealed extensive preparation and strategic thinking about leveraging my professional relationships for his advancement. During their subsequent meeting, which Patricia later described to me in confidence, James had presented himself as someone with immediate availability and comprehensive resources to contribute to their potential partnership. His eagerness to commit significant time and energy to exploring new business relationships stood in stark contrast to his complete silence regarding our marriage situation, providing clear evidence of his authentic priorities when forced to allocate his limited attention and resources. More troubling was Patricia's observation that James had discussed his access to my professional network and client relationships as primary assets he could bring to any business collaboration. His willingness to commoditize my reputation and professional connections demonstrated the transactional nature of his approach to our marriage and confirmed my analysis that he viewed our relationship primarily as a strategic business arrangement rather than a personal commitment. Patricia's feedback also revealed that James had expressed confidence about his ability to maintain and expand access to high-value professional relationships within Richmond's financial services community. His assurance suggested that he either remained oblivious to the potential consequences of his behavior or possessed such remarkable arrogance that he believed his abandonment of our marriage would not affect his professional standing or access to the network he had cultivated through our relationship. The financial pressure created by freezing our joint accounts had generated equally revealing responses that confirmed James's sense of entitlement regarding our shared resources. Rather than interpreting the account restrictions as legitimate security measures or opportunities for necessary communication about our financial arrangements, James had immediately sought alternative methods for accessing funds without acknowledging the need for collaboration or transparency with me. His contact with our banking representatives had been characterized by frustration and demands for expedited resolution procedures that would restore his independent access to our shared assets. The tone and content of his communications, which the bank manager discreetly shared with me as the primary account holder, revealed his expectation that financial resources should remain available for his use, regardless of the status of our marriage, or the obvious need for communication about major withdrawals and transfers. Most significantly, James had attempted to establish new financial accounts using our joint credit history and shared assets as collateral, effectively trying to leverage our marriage for his independent financial benefit, while avoiding the transparency and accountability that joint financial management required. His actions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of financial systems combined with complete disregard for the ethical obligations of shared asset management within marriage relationships. The banking representative had declined James's requests for new account establishment without my explicit consent and participation, explaining that his recent pattern of unusual financial activity had triggered security protocols that required both account holders to verify their identity and confirm their continued agreement to shared financial arrangements. This professional response had created additional pressure that would require James to address our marriage situation directly, if he wished to maintain access to the financial resources he had been exploiting. The social pressure generated by my strategic appearances at industry events without James had produced widespread curiosity and concern within Richmond's financial services community. Multiple professional contacts had reached out to express surprise about James's absence from events where our joint attendance had been expected, creating a network of communication that inevitably reached James through various channels and increased the visibility of our marriage difficulties. Thomas Richardson from Pinnacle Wealth Management had contacted me directly to inquire about James's availability for a consulting project they had discussed during our wedding reception. Thomas's confusion about James's sudden unavailability had prompted questions about whether personal circumstances were affecting his professional commitments, creating exactly the type of professional scrutiny that James would find uncomfortable and potentially damaging to his reputation. Similarly, Catherine Morrison from Virginia Capital Management had expressed concern about James's failure to follow up on collaboration opportunities they had explored during our wedding celebration. Her disappointment about missed business possibilities had been communicated to other professionals within our shared network, generating discussions about James's reliability and professional judgment that would affect his future opportunities for advancement and partnership development. The cumulative effect of these professional inquiries and concerns was creating exactly the type of reputation pressure that I had anticipated would motivate James to address our marriage situation, rather than allowing speculation and uncertainty to damage his professional standing. His response to this social scrutiny would provide additional insights into his priorities and his assessment of the relative importance of maintaining professional relationships versus pursuing his alternative commitments with Caroline Mitchell. Rebecca Thompson's expression of concern about my emotional well-being had provided James with a direct opportunity to demonstrate genuine care and concern for my situation, or to reveal his fundamental indifference to my welfare. Her carefully crafted message had communicated that I was experiencing difficulties that might benefit from support and attention from my husband, creating circumstances where any reasonable spouse would naturally respond with concern and outreach attempts. James's reaction to Rebecca's concern had been perhaps the most revealing and disturbing aspect of the entire testing process. Rather than contacting me directly to inquire about my situation or offer support during what Rebecca had characterized as a challenging period, James had responded with suggestions that I was probably experiencing normal adjustment difficulties and should consider professional counseling if I required assistance managing my emotional responses independently. His recommendation that I seek professional help rather than spousal support demonstrated a remarkable combination of callousness and deflection that revealed his fundamental approach to our marriage relationship. Rather than acknowledging any responsibility for my emotional state or recognizing that his abandonment of our honeymoon might have contributed to my difficulties, he had characterized my situation as a personal problem requiring individual resolution rather than mutual support and communication. The tone and content of James's response to Rebecca had been so dismissive and detached that she had immediately recognized the profound problems in our marriage and had contacted me to express her concern about his complete lack of empathy or appropriate spousal concern. Rebecca's shock at his reaction had provided additional confirmation that his behavior represented genuine character deficiencies, rather than temporary stress or poor judgment under difficult circumstances. The employment opportunity presented through Marcus Wellington at Commonwealth Investment Group had created the most definitive test of James's competing priorities and had generated the most conclusive evidence about his true commitments. The position had offered substantial career advancement, financial benefits, and professional prestige that aligned perfectly with the ambitions James had consistently expressed throughout our relationship regarding his long-term professional objectives. Marcus had presented the opportunity with enthusiasm and confidence, explaining that James's apparent expertise and professional connections made him an attractive candidate for their wealth management division expansion. The offer had included competitive compensation, comprehensive benefits, and accelerated advancement opportunities that would provide exactly the type of career growth James had claimed to be pursuing through his various professional development activities. However, accepting the Commonwealth position would have required James to abandon his consulting relationship with Caroline Mitchell and commit to exclusive employment that would prevent him from pursuing the independent business ventures they had been developing together. His response to this significant opportunity would reveal whether his relationship with Caroline was truly about professional development or represented personal commitments that superseded career advancement possibilities. James's reaction to the Commonwealth opportunity had been swift, definitive, and remarkably revealing. He had declined the position without requesting additional details about compensation packages, advancement timelines, or growth potential, explaining to Marcus that he had already committed to alternative business arrangements that precluded accepting traditional employment opportunities, regardless of their attractiveness or benefits. His immediate rejection of a significant career advancement opportunity, without even exploring the details or attempting to negotiate terms that might accommodate his existing commitments, had provided conclusive evidence that his relationship with Caroline represented his primary priority. The certainty and speed of his refusal had demonstrated that no professional opportunity, regardless of its substantial merits, would compete successfully with his commitment to Caroline and their shared business ventures. Marcus had been surprised and somewhat confused by James's rapid rejection of what he considered an exceptional opportunity for career growth and financial advancement. His feedback about the conversation had revealed that James had seemed uncomfortable discussing the reasons for his unavailability, and had provided vague explanations about prior commitments that prevented him from considering new opportunities at the present time. The cumulative results of my comprehensive testing strategy had produced an unambiguous and comprehensive picture of James's true character, authentic priorities, and genuine commitments. Every component of the testing process had generated responses that confirmed his emotional detachment from our marriage, his continued exploitation of our shared resources and professional connections, and his primary dedication to his relationship and business partnership with Caroline Mitchell. The evidence gathered through the testing process had also demonstrated that James possessed no genuine intention of repairing our marriage, addressing his deceptive behavior, or acknowledging his responsibilities and commitments as a husband. His consistent pattern of prioritizing business opportunities, maintaining financial access to our shared resources, and pursuing his relationship with Caroline over any consideration for my well-being or our marriage vows, had confirmed that his abandonment of our honeymoon represented his authentic priorities rather than a temporary lapse in judgment or reaction to external pressures. More importantly, the testing strategy had provided me with comprehensive and documented evidence of James's character and decision-making processes that would be essential for the strategic response phase of my approach. Rather than relying on assumptions, interpretations, or emotional reactions to his behavior, I now possessed irrefutable proof of his priorities and commitments that would support my strategic actions and protect my interests moving forward. The professional network that James had attempted to exploit for his advancement was beginning to recognize inconsistencies in his behavior and reliability that would affect his future opportunities for collaboration and partnership development. The financial institutions that managed our shared resources had implemented security measures that would prevent further exploitation of our joint assets without my explicit consent and participation. The social dynamics within our community were creating pressure for accountability and transparency that James would find increasingly difficult to avoid or manage through charm and manipulation. Perhaps most significantly, the testing process had demonstrated my own analytical capabilities, strategic thinking abilities, and emotional resilience in managing complex interpersonal and professional challenges. Rather than remaining a passive victim of James's deception and abandonment, I had transformed the situation into an opportunity to gather intelligence, protect my interests, and position myself advantageously for achieving positive outcomes from devastating personal circumstances. The conclusion of my testing period had marked the end of any uncertainty about the nature of my marriage, the possibility of reconciliation with James, or the appropriate course of action for protecting my future interests. The evidence was comprehensive, documented, and irrefutable. James had revealed his true character through his own responses to realistic scenarios and genuine opportunities, providing me with the foundation necessary to proceed with confidence and determination toward the strategic response his systematic betrayal and calculated exploitation had earned. The woman who had been abandoned during her honeymoon had evolved into someone who possessed complete understanding of her situation, comprehensive evidence of the deception she had experienced, and clear strategic vision for ensuring that appropriate consequences would result from James's choices. The foundation was now established for implementing the decisive actions that would demonstrate the profound mistake James had made when he chose to abandon and exploit a woman who possessed both the intelligence to understand his deception and the resources to ensure that justice would be achieved through strategic action rather than emotional reaction. The conclusive results of my initial testing strategy provided the foundation for conducting a comprehensive investigation into the full scope of James's deceptive activities and the extensive network of relationships he had maintained while presenting himself as my committed husband. The evidence I had gathered through strategic observation and documentation revealed patterns of systematic dishonesty that extended far beyond his relationship with Caroline Mitchell, and suggested a sophisticated approach to manipulating professional and personal relationships for strategic advantage. My professional background in wealth management had provided me with extensive experience in conducting thorough background research, analyzing financial records, and identifying patterns of behavior that revealed character and integrity issues among potential clients and business partners. These analytical skills, combined with my determination to understand the complete truth about my marriage, enabled me to undertake an investigation that would expose the full extent of James's deception and provide the comprehensive evidence necessary for implementing an effective strategic response. The first phase of my expanded investigation focused on conducting detailed analysis of James's financial activities throughout the entire period of our relationship, extending beyond the joint accounts I had previously examined to include his individual banking relationships, credit arrangements, and investment activities. This comprehensive financial review would reveal the true scope of his resource allocation decisions and provide insight into his priorities and commitments that extended beyond what he had disclosed during our courtship and marriage. Through careful examination of financial records that I was legally entitled to access as his spouse, I discovered that James had maintained several individual investment accounts and credit facilities that he had never mentioned during our discussions about financial planning and shared future objectives. These undisclosed accounts contained substantial assets that had been accumulated through methods that were not immediately apparent from his stated income sources and professional activities. Further investigation revealed that James had been receiving regular payments from multiple sources that were not associated with his employment at Patterson and Associates or any consulting activities he had previously disclosed to me. These payments appeared to represent ongoing business relationships or partnership arrangements that had been established and maintained without my knowledge throughout our entire relationship period. The pattern of these undisclosed income sources suggested that James had been operating essentially as an independent business entity while maintaining the appearance of traditional employment and shared financial planning with me. His systematic concealment of these financial arrangements indicated deliberate deception about his professional activities and resource allocation decisions that affected our marriage relationship and shared financial planning. Most concerning was the discovery that James had been using information about my professional clients and business relationships to develop his own revenue streams through consulting arrangements and referral agreements that leveraged my reputation and network connections without my knowledge or consent. These activities represented not only personal betrayal but also potential professional liability issues that could affect my standing within the financial services industry. The second phase of my investigation involved extensive research into Caroline Mitchell's background, professional activities, and business relationships to understand the full nature of her partnership with James and the scope of their shared objectives. This research would provide crucial context for evaluating the significance of their relationship and the potential implications for resolving the situation surrounding my marriage. Caroline's professional history revealed a pattern of strategic relationship building with established financial services professionals that consistently resulted in career advancement and business opportunities that exceeded what her individual qualifications and experience would typically support. Her ability to develop influential partnerships and secure advantageous business arrangements suggested sophisticated networking skills combined with strategic thinking about leveraging relationships for professional advancement. More significantly, my investigation revealed that Caroline had previously been married to another financial services professional whose career and professional network she had similarly leveraged before transitioning to her current circumstances. The pattern of her relationship history suggested that her partnership with James represented a calculated approach to accessing established professional networks and resources, rather than genuine personal or business collaboration based on mutual contribution and shared objectives. The timeline of Caroline's relationship with James indicated that their connection had been established during the early months of our engagement period, suggesting that James had been developing alternative relationship options while maintaining his commitment to our marriage planning and celebration. This overlap confirmed that his approach to our relationship had been strategic rather than authentic from a much earlier point than his honeymoon abandonment had initially suggested. Further research into Caroline's current business activities revealed that Sterling Bridge Advisors, the consulting firm she had established, was primarily focused on facilitating transitions for established financial professionals who possessed valuable client relationships and industry connections. Her business model essentially involved helping successful professionals extract maximum value from their existing networks, while transitioning to independent practice arrangements that provided greater financial flexibility and professional autonomy. The alignment between Caroline's business expertise and James's situation as someone with access to valuable professional relationships through our marriage suggested that their partnership represented a calculated strategy for monetizing the network connections he had developed through our relationship. This understanding provided additional context for his systematic concealment of their business arrangement and his prioritization of their partnership over our marriage commitments. The third phase of my investigation focused on documenting the full scope of James's professional misrepresentations and unauthorized use of my reputation and network connections for his business development activities. This research would provide the evidence necessary for protecting my professional standing and ensuring that appropriate consequences resulted from his exploitation of my career achievements and industry relationships. Through careful examination of industry communications, conference presentations, and business development materials, I discovered that James had been systematically representing himself as a partner or associate in my professional activities, while developing relationships with potential clients and business partners. His misrepresentations had created the impression that he possessed direct access to my expertise, client relationships, and industry influence in ways that significantly exceeded his actual role in my professional activities. Most problematic was evidence that James had been providing confidential information about my clients and their financial circumstances to potential business partners, as a demonstration of his access to valuable market intelligence and relationship opportunities. This unauthorized disclosure of privileged client information represented serious professional ethics violations that could result in regulatory sanctions and damage to my reputation within the financial services industry. The documentation I gathered revealed that James had used specific details about my client relationships and professional achievements in marketing materials and business proposals for his consulting activities with Caroline Mitchell. His willingness to exploit confidential professional information for personal advancement demonstrated a level of ethical disregard that extended beyond personal betrayal to encompass potential legal and regulatory violations. The fourth phase of my investigation involved research into the broader network of professional relationships that James had developed through his association with me and his systematic exploitation of our marriage for business advancement purposes. This analysis would reveal the full scope of potential damage to my professional reputation and provide insight into the strategies necessary for protecting my career interests moving forward. The investigation revealed that James had established business relationships with numerous professionals within Richmond's financial services community, who believed they were developing partnerships with both James and me, as a collaborative team. His systematic misrepresentation of our professional relationship had created expectations and commitments that would require careful management to protect my reputation and maintain the integrity of my independent professional relationships. Several prominent industry professionals had been led to believe that James possessed decision-making authority regarding my professional activities and client relationships, creating potential complications for future business development and partnership opportunities. The scope of these misrepresentations suggested that resolving the situation would require comprehensive communication with affected parties to clarify the true nature of our professional relationship and James's lack of authority regarding my business activities. The investigation also revealed that James had been using our joint social media presence and shared professional associations to enhance his credibility and market positioning in ways that significantly overstated his qualifications and achievements. His systematic appropriation of my professional accomplishments and industry recognition had created a public persona that was fundamentally deceptive and would require strategic correction to protect my individual reputation. The fifth phase of my investigation focused on understanding the legal and regulatory implications of James's activities and developing strategies for protecting my interests while ensuring that appropriate consequences resulted from his systematic deception and professional misconduct. This analysis would provide the foundation for implementing a comprehensive response that addressed both personal and professional dimensions of his betrayal. Legal consultation revealed that James's unauthorized use of confidential client information and misrepresentation of his professional authority could result in regulatory sanctions, professional licensing issues, and potential civil liability for damages resulting from his misconduct. The documentation I had gathered would support formal complaints with relevant regulatory authorities and provide the evidence necessary for pursuing appropriate legal remedies. More importantly, the legal analysis confirmed that James's systematic deception about his professional activities and resource allocation decisions provided grounds for favorable resolution of our marriage dissolution proceedings. His concealment of assets, unauthorized use of joint resources, and breach of fiduciary duties as a spouse would support claims for equitable distribution of assets and potential damages for his fraudulent conduct. The regulatory implications of James's activities also provided opportunities for protecting my professional reputation through proactive disclosure and cooperation with industry authorities. By voluntarily reporting his misconduct and providing comprehensive documentation of his unauthorized activities, I could demonstrate my commitment to professional ethics while minimizing potential liability for his actions. The comprehensive investigation I had conducted revealed that James's abandonment of our honeymoon represented only the most visible manifestation of systematic deception that had characterized our entire relationship. His calculated approach to exploiting our marriage for professional advancement, combined with his extensive financial deception and professional misconduct, demonstrated character deficiencies that extended far beyond simple personal betrayal to encompass sophisticated fraud and manipulation. The evidence I had gathered provided a complete picture of James's true character and priorities that would support decisive strategic action to protect my interests and ensure appropriate consequences for his systematic exploitation of our relationship. Rather than remaining a victim of his deception, I was positioned to demonstrate that abandoning and exploiting a woman of intelligence, integrity, and resources would prove to be the most costly mistake he had ever made. The investigation process had also strengthened my confidence in my analytical abilities, professional judgment, and capacity for strategic thinking under pressure. The skills and determination I had demonstrated in uncovering the truth about James's activities would serve me well in implementing the comprehensive response strategy that his betrayal had earned and that justice demanded. The comprehensive evidence I had assembled through my systematic investigation provided the foundation for implementing a strategic confrontation that would serve multiple objectives simultaneously. The approach required careful orchestration to ensure maximum effectiveness while maintaining my professional integrity and protecting my long-term interests. My experience in wealth management had taught me that successful outcomes in complex situations demanded meticulous preparation, precise timing, and strategic coordination of multiple elements to achieve optimal results. The first component of my confrontation strategy involved establishing the proper legal and professional framework to ensure that all subsequent actions would be conducted within appropriate boundaries, while maximizing the protective value of the evidence I had gathered. This foundation would safeguard my interests while creating accountability mechanisms that would prevent James from continuing his pattern of deception and manipulation without consequences. I arranged comprehensive legal consultation with Margaret Harrison at Harrison & Associates, a prominent family law firm specializing in high-asset divorce proceedings and complex financial disputes. Margaret's reputation for strategic thinking and thorough preparation made her the ideal advocate for addressing the sophisticated deception and professional misconduct that characterized my situation. Her expertise would ensure that my response strategy aligned with legal requirements while achieving maximum protective benefit for my professional and financial interests. During our initial consultation, Margaret reviewed the extensive documentation I had compiled and confirmed that the evidence supported multiple legal actions that would address both the personal betrayal and professional misconduct I had discovered. The systematic nature of James's deception, combined with his unauthorized use of confidential client information and misrepresentation of professional authority, created substantial liability exposure that would significantly strengthen my position in any legal proceedings. Margaret's analysis also confirmed that James's concealment of assets and unauthorized use of joint resources constituted serious breaches of fiduciary duty that would support claims for equitable distribution of assets and potential damages for fraudulent conduct. The comprehensive financial records I had gathered would provide the evidentiary foundation necessary for ensuring favorable resolution of property division and support arrangements. The second component of my preparation strategy focused on coordinating with relevant professional regulatory authorities to ensure that James's misconduct would be appropriately addressed through industry channels while protecting my professional reputation from any potential liability resulting from his unauthorized activities. This proactive approach would demonstrate my commitment to professional ethics while establishing clear boundaries between his misconduct and my legitimate business activities. I scheduled confidential consultations with compliance officers at the Virginia State Corporation Commission and the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority to discuss the regulatory implications of James's activities and establish appropriate disclosure procedures. These discussions would ensure that my voluntary cooperation and comprehensive documentation would be recognized as evidence of my professional integrity rather than potential complicity in his misconduct. The regulatory consultation process also provided opportunities to clarify the scope of potential sanctions that James might face for his unauthorized use of confidential client information and misrepresentation of professional credentials. Understanding these consequences would enable me to incorporate regulatory pressure into my overall strategy for ensuring appropriate accountability for his systematic deception. The third element of my preparation involved developing a comprehensive communication strategy to address the professional relationships that had been affected by James's misrepresentations, while protecting my reputation within Richmond's financial services community. This approach would require careful coordination of timing and messaging to ensure consistent and accurate information reached all relevant parties, while minimizing potential confusion or speculation about my involvement in his misconduct. I prepared detailed briefing materials that documented the true nature of my professional relationship with James and clarified the extent of his unauthorized activities using my reputation and client relationships for his business development purposes. These materials would provide clear and factual information that could be shared with affected colleagues and business partners to correct any misunderstandings created by his systematic misrepresentations. The communication strategy also included coordination with my professional liability insurance provider to ensure appropriate coverage for any potential claims or regulatory actions that might result from James's unauthorized activities. This preparation would provide additional protection for my practice while demonstrating proactive risk management that would be viewed favorably by clients and industry colleagues. The fourth component of my preparation focused on establishing financial protections and asset preservation measures that would prevent James from continuing to exploit our shared resources, while ensuring that my individual assets and professional income streams remain secure throughout the confrontation and resolution process. These measures would provide immediate practical benefits while supporting the broader strategic objectives of my response plan. Working with Margaret Harrison, I implemented comprehensive asset protection strategies including modification of joint account access rights, establishment of separate financial accounts for my professional income, and documentation of individual asset ownership that would prevent unauthorized transfers or expenditures during the dissolution process. These measures would ensure that James could not continue his pattern of financial exploitation, while providing clear documentation of asset ownership for legal proceedings. I also established new professional banking relationships that would provide enhanced security features and monitoring capabilities to prevent unauthorized access attempts or fraudulent activities that might affect my business operations. These precautions would ensure continuity of my professional activities while providing additional evidence of responsible financial management that would support my position in any legal proceedings. The fifth element of my preparation strategy involved coordinating with key professional colleagues and industry contacts to ensure that the revelation of James's misconduct would be managed in a way that protected ongoing business relationships, while establishing clear boundaries between his activities and my legitimate professional practice. This coordination would prevent potential confusion or speculation that might affect my client relationships or business development opportunities. I arranged confidential discussions with senior colleagues at Meridian Financial Advisory to brief them on the situation and establish protocols for managing any client inquiries or business impacts that might result from the revelation of James's misconduct. Their understanding and support would provide crucial backing for maintaining professional stability while addressing the personal and legal challenges ahead. The coordination process also included strategic discussions with key clients who might have been affected by James's unauthorized use of confidential information or misrepresentation of his professional authority. These conversations would demonstrate transparency and commitment to protecting their interests, while ensuring that appropriate corrective measures were implemented to prevent any ongoing exposure or liability. The sixth component of my preparation involved developing a comprehensive evidence presentation strategy that would maximize the impact of the documentation I had gathered, while ensuring that James would be confronted with irrefutable proof of his systematic deception in a manner that would compel acknowledgement rather than continued denial or deflection. This approach would create optimal conditions for achieving accountability and resolution, rather than prolonged conflict or litigation. The evidence presentation would be organized to demonstrate the systematic nature of James's deception through chronological documentation that revealed the progression of his misconduct from the early stages of our relationship through his abandonment of our honeymoon and continued exploitation of shared resources. This comprehensive narrative would make denial or rationalization impossible, while providing clear justification for the consequences he would face. I also prepared supplementary documentation that would demonstrate the professional and financial impacts of James's misconduct on my career and business interests. This material would support claims for damages while illustrating the scope of corrective actions necessary to address the consequences of his unauthorized activities and misrepresentations. The seventh element of my preparation strategy focused on establishing the optimal timing and setting for the confrontation that would provide the best opportunity for achieving meaningful resolution, while maintaining appropriate professional decorum and legal protections. The approach would need to balance the element of surprise with sufficient formality to ensure that the seriousness of the situation was clearly communicated and documented. I arranged for the confrontation to take place in Margaret Harrison's law office conference room, providing a neutral professional setting that would emphasize the legal gravity of the situation, while ensuring that appropriate witnesses and documentation procedures would be available. This setting would also provide immediate access to legal counsel and support that might be necessary depending on James's response to the evidence presentation. The timing of the confrontation was coordinated to occur during a period when James would have limited ability to implement immediate countermeasures or attempt to conceal additional evidence of his misconduct. This strategic timing would maximize the effectiveness of the evidence presentation while providing optimal conditions for achieving acknowledgement and resolution rather than continued conflict. The eighth component of my preparation involved developing contingency plans for various potential responses that James might provide when confronted with comprehensive evidence of his systematic deception and professional misconduct. These contingency plans would ensure that I remained strategically positioned, regardless of his initial reaction, and would provide clear pathways for achieving appropriate resolution under different scenarios. The contingency planning process included preparation for potential admission and cooperation scenarios, where James might acknowledge his misconduct and agree to appropriate corrective measures and compensation arrangements. This optimistic scenario would require specific legal documentation and settlement frameworks that would ensure comprehensive resolution while providing appropriate protection for my ongoing interests. Alternative contingency plans addressed potential denial or deflection scenarios where James might attempt to minimize his misconduct or shift responsibility for the consequences of his actions. These plans included escalation strategies that would ensure appropriate legal and regulatory pressure could be applied to compel accountability and resolution despite his potential resistance or continued deception. The ninth element of my preparation strategy focused on ensuring that the confrontation process would be thoroughly documented to provide comprehensive records that could support subsequent legal proceedings, regulatory actions, or professional communications that might be necessary to achieve complete resolution of the situation. This documentation would serve both protective and evidential purposes while demonstrating the professionalism and thoroughness of my approach to addressing the crisis. The documentation strategy included arrangements for professional recording of the confrontation proceedings, witness statements from relevant parties, and comprehensive written records of all evidence presented and responses received. These materials would provide indisputable documentation of the confrontation process and its outcomes that could be utilized in various legal and professional contexts as needed. The preparation process also included coordination with Margaret Harrison regarding legal strategies for utilizing the confrontation documentation in subsequent proceedings, while ensuring compliance with relevant confidentiality requirements and professional ethics obligations. This coordination would maximize the utility of the documentation while maintaining appropriate legal and professional standards. The comprehensive preparation I had undertaken represented the culmination of months of strategic thinking, systematic investigation, and professional coordination that had transformed me from an abandoned bride into a formidable advocate for justice and accountability. The evidence I had gathered, the legal framework I had established, and the professional support I had secured provided the foundation for a confrontation that would demonstrate the profound mistake James had made when he chose to abandon and exploit a woman of intelligence, integrity, and substantial resources. The preparation process had also reinforced my confidence in my analytical abilities, strategic thinking capabilities, and professional judgment under extraordinary pressure. The systematic approach I had developed for addressing this complex situation demonstrated skills and determination that would serve me well throughout my career and personal life, regardless of the specific outcomes of the immediate confrontation. As I finalized the preparations for confronting James with comprehensive evidence of his systematic betrayal and professional misconduct, I felt a profound sense of readiness and determination that reflected both the thoroughness of my preparation and the justice of my cause. The woman who had been abandoned during her honeymoon was prepared to demonstrate that such treatment of a person of substance and integrity would result in consequences far more severe than James had anticipated when he made his calculated decision to prioritize his relationship with Caroline Mitchell over his marriage commitments and professional obligations. The conference room at Harrison and Associates possessed the austere professionalism that befitted the gravity of the confrontation I had orchestrated with meticulous precision over the preceding months. Margaret Harrison had arranged the space to facilitate optimal presentation of evidence while ensuring appropriate legal protections and documentation procedures. The polished mahogany table, leather-bound chairs, and floor-to-ceiling law books created an atmosphere of serious professional discourse that would emphasize the legal and regulatory implications of James's systematic misconduct. I arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time to review final preparations and ensure that all documentation was organized for maximum impact during the evidence presentation. The comprehensive materials I had assembled represented months of investigation and strategic analysis that would demonstrate the full scope of James's deception while providing irrefutable proof of his professional misconduct and personal betrayal. Margaret Harrison joined me for final coordination regarding presentation strategy and potential response scenarios, based on her extensive experience with complex financial disputes and high-conflict dissolution proceedings. Her presence would provide immediate legal counsel while emphasizing the serious legal consequences that James would face as a result of his systematic exploitation of our marriage and unauthorized professional activities. James arrived precisely at the appointed time, his appearance suggesting confidence and casual dismissal of what he presumably expected would be routine divorce discussions initiated by an emotionally distraught spouse unable to accept the reality of their marriage dissolution. His demeanor reflected the calculated arrogance that had characterized his approach to our relationship, and his apparent belief that his abandonment of our honeymoon represented a minor inconvenience rather than grounds for serious legal and professional consequences. The transformation in James's expression upon recognizing the formal legal setting and comprehensive documentation arrayed on the conference table provided immediate confirmation that his expectations regarding this meeting had been fundamentally incorrect. The presence of legal counsel, organized evidence materials, and professional recording equipment clearly indicated that this confrontation would address far more serious issues than routine marital disagreements or emotional processing of his departure from our honeymoon. Margaret Harrison opened the proceedings by establishing the legal framework for the discussion and confirming that James understood his right to legal representation during examination of evidence regarding potential criminal and regulatory violations that had been discovered during investigation of his professional and financial activities. Her formal introduction immediately established that James faced serious legal exposure rather than simple divorce proceedings, creating an atmosphere of accountability that would compel honest responses rather than continued manipulation or deflection. I began the evidence presentation by establishing the chronological framework of James's systematic deception throughout our relationship, beginning with documentation of his undisclosed financial activities during our engagement period, and progressing through his abandonment of our honeymoon and continued exploitation of shared resources during my absence in Hawaii. This comprehensive timeline demonstrated that his misconduct represented calculated long-term strategy rather than isolated incidents or emotional reactions to marital difficulties. The financial evidence I presented included detailed documentation of James's concealment of individual investment accounts, undisclosed income sources, and unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts to Caroline Mitchell, and various business entities associated with their consulting partnership. The systematic nature of these financial deceptions demonstrated sophisticated planning and deliberate exploitation of our marriage for personal enrichment, while maintaining the facade of shared financial planning and mutual commitment to our future together. James's initial response to the financial evidence involved attempts to characterize his undisclosed activities as legitimate business development that he had simply failed to communicate effectively due to the complexity of the arrangements and his desire to avoid burdening me with details that might distract from our wedding planning. His explanations demonstrated the same pattern of manipulation and deflection that had characterized his approach to our relationship, though the comprehensive documentation made his rationalizations obviously inadequate and unconvincing. Margaret Harrison's professional questioning regarding the legal implications of asset concealment and unauthorized use of joint resources quickly dispelled any suggestion that James's financial activities represented innocent oversights or communication failures. Her detailed analysis of fiduciary duties, disclosure requirements, and fraud statutes made clear that his systematic deception constituted serious legal violations that could result in criminal prosecution and substantial civil liability regardless of his stated intentions or motivations. The second phase of my evidence presentation focused on documenting James's unauthorized use of confidential client information and systematic misrepresentation of his professional authority within Richmond's financial services community. This documentation included copies of business proposals, marketing materials, and correspondence that demonstrated his exploitation of my reputation and professional relationships for his personal advancement and business development with Caroline Mitchell. The evidence revealed that James had provided specific details about my client's financial circumstances, investment strategies, and business relationships to potential partners as demonstration of his access to valuable market intelligence and networking opportunities. His unauthorized disclosure of privileged client information represented serious professional ethics violations that could result in regulatory sanctions, professional licensing issues, and potential civil liability for damages resulting from his misconduct. James's response to the professional misconduct evidence initially involved denial of any intentional wrongdoing, followed by attempts to characterize his activities as legitimate networking and business development that naturally incorporated information about shared professional relationships and mutual business interests. His explanations demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of professional ethics requirements and fiduciary obligations that govern the handling of confidential client information within the financial services industry. Margaret Harrison's analysis of regulatory requirements and professional liability implications quickly exposed the inadequacy of James's explanations while establishing that his misconduct created substantial exposure for regulatory sanctions and professional consequences that would affect his ability to maintain his current employment and pursue future opportunities within the financial services industry. Her detailed explanation of potential penalties and licensing implications transformed James's casual dismissal into obvious concern about the serious professional consequences he would face. The third component of my evidence presentation addressed James's systematic misrepresentation of our professional relationship and his unauthorized appropriation of my achievements and industry recognition for his business development activities with Caroline Mitchell. This documentation included conference presentations, business proposals, and marketing materials that demonstrated his willingness to exploit my professional reputation while concealing the true nature of his relationship with Caroline and their shared business objectives. The evidence demonstrated that James had consistently presented himself as a partner or associate in my professional activities, while developing relationships with potential clients and business partners who believed they were engaging with both of us as a collaborative team. His systematic misrepresentation had created expectations and commitments that placed my professional reputation at risk, while providing him with business opportunities that he could not have accessed, based solely on his individual qualifications and achievements. James's response to evidence of professional misrepresentation initially involved attempts to minimize the significance of his statements and suggestions that any confusion about our professional relationship resulted from innocent misunderstandings rather than deliberate deception. However, the comprehensive documentation of his systematic appropriation of my achievements and credentials made clear that his misrepresentations represented calculated strategy rather than communication errors or misunderstandings. The fourth phase of my evidence presentation focused on documenting the full scope of James's relationship with Caroline Mitchell and their coordination in exploiting our marriage for strategic advantage while developing their business partnership and personal relationship. This evidence included financial records, communication documentation, and witness statements that revealed the calculated nature of their collaboration and James's systematic deception regarding his commitments to our marriage. The documentation revealed that James had been in regular communication with Caroline throughout our engagement period, sharing intimate details about his personal life, expressing doubts about his commitment to our marriage, and discussing strategies for managing the complications that our relationship created for his professional and personal objectives with Caroline. His communications demonstrated that our marriage had been viewed as a temporary strategic arrangement, rather than a genuine personal commitment deserving of loyalty and honesty. Most damaging was evidence that James had explicitly discussed his intention to use our marriage as a mechanism for accessing my professional network and financial resources, while maintaining his primary emotional and business commitment to Caroline Mitchell. His communications included detailed planning for maximizing the business value of our wedding celebration, strategies for leveraging my professional relationships for his advancement, and timeline discussions regarding his planned transition from our marriage to his intended future with Caroline. James's confrontation with comprehensive evidence of his relationship with Caroline and their strategic exploitation of our marriage produced the most dramatic response of the entire proceedings. His initial attempts at denial quickly collapsed when faced with documented communications, financial transfers, and witness statements that provided irrefutable proof of their coordination and his systematic deception regarding his marriage commitments. The realization that his private communications and strategic planning had been discovered and documented created visible distress that contrasted sharply with his earlier confidence and casual dismissal of the confrontation proceedings. His recognition that comprehensive evidence existed regarding his most sensitive activities and relationships marked the crucial turning point where continued deception became obviously futile and counterproductive. Margaret Harrison's analysis of the evidence regarding James's relationship with Caroline emphasized the legal implications of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress that could support substantial damage claims and favorable property division arrangements. Her professional assessment transformed the confrontation from personal dispute resolution into serious legal proceedings, with significant financial and professional consequences for James's future. The fifth and final component of my evidence presentation addressed the broader pattern of James's exploitative behavior and the systematic nature of his approach to personal and professional relationships. This analysis demonstrated that his treatment of our marriage represented characteristic behavior rather than isolated poor judgment, providing context for understanding the calculated nature of his deception and the appropriate scope of consequences he should face. The comprehensive evidence revealed that James had approached our relationship with the same strategic thinking and manipulative tactics that characterized his professional activities, viewing personal commitments as resources to be managed and exploited, rather than authentic relationships deserving of honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. His systematic approach to deception demonstrated sophisticated understanding of relationship dynamics, combined with complete disregard for ethical obligations and personal integrity. James's response to the comprehensive evidence presentation evolved from initial confidence through attempted rationalization and ultimately to recognition that continued deception was impossible, given the thoroughness of the documentation and the serious legal consequences he faced. His acknowledgement of the evidence accuracy marked the crucial moment when accountability became unavoidable and meaningful resolution could be pursued. The confrontation concluded with James's recognition that his systematic deception had been comprehensively documented and that serious legal and professional consequences would result from his misconduct, regardless of his cooperation or resistance during resolution proceedings. His understanding of the evidence scope and potential consequences created optimal conditions for negotiating appropriate accountability measures and corrective actions that would address the full scope of damage resulting from his betrayal. Margaret Harrison's final summary of legal options and potential outcomes emphasized that James's comprehensive misconduct had created multiple avenues for pursuing accountability and compensation, while protecting my professional reputation and financial interests. Her analysis confirmed that the evidence I had gathered provided exceptional foundation for achieving favorable resolution, while ensuring that appropriate consequences would result from his systematic exploitation of our marriage. The revelation moment had achieved its primary objectives by compelling James to acknowledge the comprehensive nature of his deception, while establishing irrefutable foundation for pursuing appropriate legal and professional consequences. The confrontation had transformed the situation from personal betrayal requiring emotional processing into documented misconduct demanding systematic accountability and justice through legal and regulatory channels. The woman who had been abandoned during her honeymoon had successfully demonstrated that such treatment of a person of intelligence, integrity, and substantial resources would result in consequences far more severe than James had anticipated when he made his calculated decision to exploit our marriage for his personal advancement and relationship with Caroline Mitchell. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.